who that is. Mm. Just give me a few moments, folks. Just sharing this out. Some of my platforms, some groups are here on Facebook or what have you. Really not going to do a lot of speaking, but I'm going to share a few the propaganda that MSNBC constants on, so y'all can get the gist as to what's really going on. Oh, and also before I fully start, hold on, let me see what her name is. I know her last name is Essex, but I can't remember what your first name is. But yes, I'd also like to thank you for subscribing to my channel as well. Actually, matter of fact, I've hold on, I can find out what your name is. Because a matter of fact, I just subscribed to your channel. Since you subscribed to mine, Sandra Essex. That's your name. Thank you, Sandra Essex and Kimberly Connor, for subscribing to my channel. All right. Okay. If I could get this thing from the site to play right. No, that's always a challenge. It's definitely always a challenge. A lot of misplaced energy here, as you guys will see.
Keep your distance, wash your hands. It takes a face covering, as we're all discovering. We're all in this together like a potpourri. Well, you can count on me and see.
Joe Biden won the presidency decisively, and he did it in a country that is nearly as polarized as it has ever been. We now have basically the final vote count, right? Biden's margin of victory is over 7 million votes, 4.5 points in the popular vote. It's a larger margin than Barack Obama's win over Mitt Romney in 2012. Obama, of course, was an incumbent then, running for re-election with all the advantages of that. And it's larger than George W. Bush's win over John Kerry in 2004. Again, an incumbent defeating a challenger. And get this, that 51.3%, it's the highest vote share of any candidate challenging a sitting incumbent since FDR's win over Herbert Hoover back in 1932. And that's because it is hard to beat incumbents. So hard, in fact, that only 4 elected presidents have lost in the last 100 years. But the country rejected Donald Trump. In the weeks since election night, we've been on this roller coaster ride. The polls were off again, and Trump looked like he might pull it out on election night. And then, of course, there was the long, drawn-out counting process, and we waited for days for the outcome in a few key states. And then, of course, there was the president's ongoing attempted Joe Biden won cleanly. And
As you may see, MSNBC continually spits out this propaganda that Joe Biden won fair and square. Those don't make sense, right? Yeah, it's an agenda going on with MSNBC. And their agenda is to protect the Democratic presidential candidates and the Democratic Party in general. more specifically the DNC. This is who they speak for. They're pretty much the mouthpieces for the DNC and the Democratic Party. So just keep that in mind as you're listening.
Clearly and fair and square. But as that comes into view, we should not forget that we also dodged a bullet. I mean, the outcome in this election came down to just a few tens of thousands of votes in the right places. Biden won Arizona, flipping it blue for the first time in more than 20 years by just over 10,000 votes. In Georgia, the margin was hardly any bigger, less than 12,000 votes. And in Wisconsin, it was a little more than 20,000. Those three states, Arizona, Georgia, Wisconsin, have a combined total of 37 electoral votes. And Joe Biden won them by a combined margin of just under 43,000 votes. If you flipped just those 43,000 to Trump, out of nearly, again, 160 million votes cast nationwide, the Electoral College would have ended up tied, 269 to 269. And we would be in a mess, a nightmare scenario, where the House of Representatives would get to decide the election, but with each state delegation getting only one vote. Now, if you just add one congressional district to those three states, say Nebraska's 2nd district, where Biden won by 22,000 votes, well, that's the whole ballgame, a second Trump term. It would take only 65,000 votes, a tiny, trivial fraction of the entire electorate, going the other way. 65,000 votes in 3 states and 1 congressional district against a popular vote margin of 7 million, of a popular vote margin of 4.5%. This is the problem with the Electoral College. It's random at a certain level. I mean, the thing itself is a slapdash compromise thrown together at the end of the Constitutional Convention as they were way out the door. And for most elections in our history, the outcome of the Electoral College has been the same as the popular vote.
That's what I'm going to present in this article. How the Electoral College is racist, and that's exactly why it still exists. And the article states, if there was ever a perfect time to reconsider everything you thought you understood about politics, from what purpose the police serves to what our history what our history textbooks really teach us about racism, 2020 is that time. And as we endure our particularly contentious election season alongside the ongoing racial reckoning in America, the much maligned history of the Electoral College should be at the forefront of our conversations. The Electoral College is one of those American institutions that most people in the country know exist. Some people have a basic understanding of, but few actually know its origins or could defend its continued existence. Before I read further, the thought this came to my mind. I remember when I was stationed overseas in Germany. Most Germans, I would say most people who live within the region of Europe in general, don't understand how America elects its presidents, its heads of state, such as the President of the United States. Because they're used to a popular vote system. And this is what Chris Hayes is calling for, to scrap the Electoral College system in favor of the popular vote. Now, do you really think corruption is going to go away if you get rid of the electoral system in favor of a popular vote system? Actually, it's not. There's ways to get around. You know what I'm saying? There's ways to get around selecting a leader that you want into office, especially if you are of an entity that has all of the power to be able to do that. This is what they have us voting for these elections for. It's equivalent to having us fighting for scraps. We're actually contributing by voting in defeating the system that doesn't benefit the majority of us. those of us who are part of the 99%. Think about one of the things about living in America is that people have made inventions to allow us to be able to speak online, to speak on social media platforms, in which people around the world can hear our message and to be able to make sense as to make sense of what's really going on in America rather than relying on mainstream news media such as CNN, MSNBC, and Fox News, which are the major MSM platforms. Do not know of the Electoral College origins or the origins of the Electoral College system. Most Americans don't even understand how the electoral system works. Most foreigners don't even understand how the electoral system works. They don't understand how we even elect the president. You know, if it's not based on the popular vote. Our popular vote doesn't elect the president. Our popular vote goes towards a group of electors that are chosen to choose a president. That's what it's all about. And basically, as the 99%, as those who do vote, we don't directly choose a president. This mechanism called the Electoral College was created to keep the 1% in power. That's the thing we have to understand. So the popular vote really doesn't matter. So even if people stop voting, let's say virtually nobody votes in the presidential election, they're gonna still have some electors in order, and then they will have to find, then the powers that shouldn't be gonna have to find another way to get us involved. It's gonna mess up their system, their mechanism that we're supposed to so-called participate in. Yeah. Something that we could participate in to ensure that the 1% stays in power. So it's never about the will of the people. And like the article says, it's the Electoral College is actually the ultimate decider of who wins the presidency. So rather than relying on a popular vote, in which you could corrupt the popular vote too by having voting machines, you know what I mean? And which has been done in other countries besides the United States, aka such as Venezuela. This is the mechanism that they have been using for over 200 years. And so by basically the scrapping the Electoral College system is not going to change things. It really isn't, because it could take the corruption to another level in which they can make every state have voting machines so they can corrupt the vote. So let's say you vote for one candidate, but then when it goes to the machine, it comes out that you voted for enough. It comes out to make it look like you voted for the other candidate. You know what I'm saying? In which everybody's vote is liable to be corrupted in some form or fashion. That's if every state has voting machines, rather than going through the uh, uh, old school way of stuffing ballots. Having voting machines change your vote, that's a new way of stuffing ballots. You see what I'm saying? So, since this is a new way of stuffing ballots, let's go into how corrupted this electoral college system is. And the article states, this isn't a flaw in the system. This is how it was intended to work. The electoral college was built this way to protect and preserve the power of 7 states, whose official population counts are far lower than those in the North because of the huge amount of disenfranchised people living in the South. That is, enslaved people, meaning human cargo, meaning chattel slaves. It didn't have to be this way. When this country's framers attended the Constitutional Convention and set out to decide how to elect the president, they discussed the idea of utilizing the popular vote to decide elections. But Southerners worried that direct democracy would disadvantage slaveholding states. Quote, the right of suffrage was much more diffusive in the North than the Southern states, and the latter could have no influence in the election on the score of Negroes. The substitution of electors obviated this difficulty and seemed on the whole to be liable to the fewest objections. Madison wrote in The Method of Appointing the Executive in 1787. The Electoral College was the compromise the founders settled on, or more specifically, their desire to maintain the system of slavery might be quashed. Its existence allowed Southern states and their white male property-owning voters to preserve their power in part due to the 3/5 clause in the Constitution, which stated that enslaved people would be counted as 3/5 of a person, thus bolstering the electoral count of slave-owning states without actually offering rights to anyone other than wealthy white men. It also gave disproportionate power to the Southern states. So the 3/5 clause in the Constitution gave Southern states not only disproportionate power, but also disproportionate representation in Congress. Not only disproportionate representation in Congress, but a disproportionate number of electoral votes. So it's no surprise then that eight of the first 9 presidential races were won by Virginians. That's right. You gotta remember that Virginia is one of the slave states. Or, as they say, one of the states that make up the Confederate States of America, in which the capital of the Confederate States of America was in Richmond, Virginia. I don't know if a lot of people know that, but that's something that we could look up later on too. Yeah, that's the capital of the Confederacy. A slave population, that any Southern state has a slave population, help their electoral chances of winning most of those presidential elections, especially the first. So as we skip on, we read 2 centuries after its founding, the Electoral College continues to uphold white supremacy. So all of this that I'm talking about, Chris Hayes doesn't even go through in his program. See, he's more worried about, oh gosh, when Donald Trump is just a puppet. All these presidents are puppets. And the puppet system is going to keep going until the people rise up and say, we're not going to put up with this puppet system any longer. See what I'm saying? Because the minute the people stand up, things are going to change. The minute the people band together, that's when things are going to change. So, then that's the thing to always remember. And for anybody who's in the chat, feel free to share this video. Definitely don't hesitate to share this video. Oh yes, good to see you in here, sister. Good to see you in here. Yes, so moving on. 2 centuries after its founder, the Electoral College continues to uphold white supremacy and disadvantage much of the electorate, particularly the black people who lived in southern states, whose votes are often overpowered by the will of electors, with most southern states staying red in recent presidential elections. That's why today presidential candidates spend a significant amount of their effort on winning over states that hold the most influence, resulting in disproportionate attention paid to swing areas. To combat the electors' ability to divide the people's choice and vote for a candidate they preferred but who didn't carry the popular vote in their state, the Supreme Court took matters into its own hands. In an unanimous ruling in July of this year, the highest court in the land decided that electors must support the will of the people. Quote stating, the state instructs its electors that they have no ground for reversing the vote of millions of its citizens. That direction accords with the Constitution as well as with the trust of a nation that here we the people rule. End quote. Justice Elena Kagan stated in the ruling. Now, you would think that the electors are supposed to have an independent voice, that they don't have to be beholden to the will of people who voted in their state. But Justice Elena Kagan says something different. That they are not allowed to vote independently. And this is why it says in the last sentence, despite this, many states, including swing states like Florida and Ohio, have no legal requirements about how electors must vote. Which makes sense. Which regardless of how you see it, it's a scam and a sham to begin with. It's pretty much like going to college. It's a scam and a sham to begin with. Regardless of whether it's PWI or HBCU, you get scammed either way. So why do we still have an electoral college? Well, we got to keep the scam going. Voting as a part of this bread and circuses system is no different than watching sports. You know what I'm saying? There's no difference between good and evil. There's no difference between the yin and the yang. You know what I'm saying? It's basically to keep us distracted. They got to keep feeding us bullshit in order for this system to continue the way it has been continuing for so many years. And that's why, and this is why this presidential system is going to keep going for many years to come. And this is not even going to get into how black people have been led to vote. How black people have been led to vote Democratic for 50 plus years, and in which LBJ famously stated that we could keep black people voting Democratic we could keep the system of slavery going on forever. But even though the plan of keep a plantation, the plantation slavery system going on forever was thwarted because of what our ancestors did back in the 19th century by having all these slavery votes and rebellions. Yup. Exactly. So anyway, what I'm gonna do here is let me see if I could play a little something. Hold on for a second, y'all. As a matter of fact, I'm gonna show y'all something too. Matter of fact, let me show y'all something, and I'll let y'all marinate on it. See if I can find it here. I can find it. That's no problem. Here it is right here. Here's a YouTube video.
We want to roll with LBJ, Lyndon Johnson, right? I want you to look up what President Obama said about Lyndon Johnson's civil rights record up until 64, the Civil Rights Act. This dude fought tooth and nail to keep us segregated, to keep us poor, to keep us uneducated. And all of a sudden, in 1964, this bigot decided he's going to give us all the rights, civil rights, and everything's changed, right? Everything's going to be much better going forward. 1965 to now, everything has gotten so much better. Thank goodness we've completely attached ourselves, lock, stock, and barrel to the Democrat Party. Thank you, LBJ. Thank you very much. Give me a break. These dudes evolved their tactics. They still working against you, and they about to move on to y'all. Listen up. Make society so damn great. See, at this thing, it was like this. It was like FDR's Great Society. No, it's like FDR's New Deal. Great Society was like FDR's New Deal on steroids, actually. So we make society so damn great. He saw it in Dwight's DNA. I already talked about that, right? Dwight Eisenhower was passing all types of civil rights bills. Nobody paid attention. He's a Republican. But Johnson seen it in his DNA. Then he had a coup. Just so happens that John F. Kennedy gets killed when he's vice president. That's Johnson's coup. Jackie's tears. JFK's wife. And he got niggas vote for 200 years. I want you to look this up. Because this couldn't explain it any better. When Lyndon Johnson signed the Voting Rights Act of 1964, he said, if niggers want to vote, I'll have them vote Democrat for 200 years. And he signed that shit. And he's been manipulating us ever since. Think I'm playing? We started moving over in the 30s under FDR, I'm not gonna lie. There's a little migration over to the Democrat Party. But we still had the ability to think for ourselves and make our own decision. And, MLK was a Republican, So, we could do these things. But now, no, you can only be a Democrat. Ever since 64, ever since this racist pretended to help our community, and look at where our community has gone. And this welfare state that he created, they're expanding it.
Hope y'all enjoyed that one. Here's another article here. For Dominant Silk's new book, Uprising, Who the Hell Said You Can't Ditch and Switch? The Awakening of Dominant Silk. We often refer to the Democratic Party as the Democrat plantation. Some think we are actually talking about a plantation. We're not. We are talking about a mindset that keeps you restricted by beliefs that control you. The liberal Democratic Party has been pulling the wool over black Americans' eyes and giving conflicted signals for decades. They say one thing and do another. They never uphold any of their promises. Democrats love keeping black people in the fight, causing us to distrust everything. We have been taught not to trust anybody, not even ourselves. The goal is to keep minorities dependent on Democrats instead of showing them how to depend on themselves. Democrats attempt to force us into their moral beliefs through education and indoctrination against traditional right and wrong. They left black Americans wounded while portraying them as the face of victimhood. They stifle freedom of speech and freedom of thought with political correctness. When they question about their actions and intentions, their brand and label you with terms that have always been the party of division. To divide and conquer are their goals. They divide Americans based on race, gender, sexuality, and class, and then put us against each other. A lot of the oppression going on in our country has been created by liberalism and liberal ideology, whose strongest supporters happen to be black. During the 1960s, black people marched in the streets for equality. Here we go. Liberalism tells everyone that the statutes are the problem. The statutes are racist. Check this out. After seeing just how easy it was to control the narrative, liberals told everyone that the American flag was racist, that the American flag was against them as black people. Once again, instead of doing research, people went out of their way to disrespect the very thing that represents the men and women who fought for their freedoms. I give them that. Actually, there have been rallies against black on black crime, but that's hardly ever talked about. It's not sexy for the MSM to talk about that. Chris says not even Fox News will ever cover that. That goes against their bylaws. Now, it's not wrong to demonize all police officers. But the thing we got to because the thing is, they're all part of the system. They're all part of the system to brutalize ADOS people, especially ADOS people. They get brutalized more than black immigrants and anybody else in this country. Until the MSM starts showing white people being brutalized by the police, I will rest assured to say that ADOS people have been brutalized by the police more than anybody. So, I mean, it's obvious. We're the bottom economic class. We're the bottom economic caste. And that's deliberate. which is why the Democrats are behind creating Jim Crow, segregation, the ghettos, so on and so forth. School to prison pipeline, that's all created by Democrats. All created by the Democrats. So Diamond Silk is justified up until this point. See, the problem with black people is too many black people still call the police the health issue. That's the last people we want to call is the police. You know what I'm saying? And that goes back into this article here. And that was a little section that was highlighted about the history of the police and how they started off as slave patrols. Let's go back up to the beginning. See if I can find it. I can find this. Give me a few moments, folks, while I get up here. Here we go. What purpose the police serves. Here we go. The movement to defund the police is getting stronger. Here's why. It probably doesn't go into, it's not going to go into the history of the police, in which they started off as slave patrols, but the recent history that we have here, even though some of this may be set up, is why there's a campaign to defund the police, meaning allocate resources away from the police department and put it towards resources where it's most needed for the majority of people who make less than $30,000 a year. The majority of the people who are raising children by themselves without any help. Excuse me. Without any help from their children's father, children's mother, and or significant other. So yeah, but this is what's going on. And even though it's being acknowledged, there still haven't been action to change the way policing is taking place in this country. So if you want to keep people, a group of people as part of the bottom economic caste, solutions such as defund the police is not going to help in keeping them as part of the. It's not going to necessarily raise their income, but it's going to give officers less of a reason to treat them with brutality. This is why This is why it's essential that you keep black people voting Democratic. The Democrats are seen as the good guys, while the Republicans are seen as the bad guys. You see, the good versus evil thing, bread and circuses. It's to keep people distracted. And the longer you keep black people distracted, the more likely in the coming years, you're not the ADOS population. They hoping is going to die off. This is their hoping, meaning the powers that shouldn't be. The sooner they die off, the better it is for those who have power. But everything that has been tried to get the ADOS population to die off hasn't worked. And I wouldn't be surprised if it never works. What happens if 50, 100 years from now, you still have ADOS people on the planet, and their population is either the same as it is now, or they have an increase in population? What you gonna do then? I mean, that's like getting the Chinese to go back to that one-child policy. But it hasn't decreased their population. It hasn't decreased their population all that much. This is probably why China is colonizing other nations, especially other nations that have black and brown people in it. So, but this is another great article. I'm going to make sure to put it in the description box as well, so everybody could get a gist as to what's going on here. But once again, I'd like to thank you for watching, and I will be doing another video hopefully soon. Other than that, y'all be easy, and I'll see y'all in the next video. Peace.